At 6:47 a.m. on December 18, 1944, Staff Sergeant Robert Brennan watched the fog roll across frozen Belgian fields and knew that in the next 90 seconds he would break every regulation he'd sworn to follow. Rocherath, Belgium. Temperature 14 degrees Fahrenheit. Visibility maybe 50 yards through morning mist, thick as smoke. German 12th SS Panzer Division infantry advancing through that fog. 80 men, maybe more. Boots crunching on frozen ground. Equipment clinking. Low voices speaking German. Brennan crouched in his foxhole hands wrapped around an M1 Garand rifle that looked standard issue but wasn't. Mounted on the right side of the receiver, barely visible, sat a 6-round external magazine he'd built 3 weeks earlier from salvaged Jeep parts. Built it in secret. Built it illegally. Built it because he couldn't watch one more friend die during a 4-second reload window. The radio crackled. All units hold current positions. Reinforcements en route, ETA 1000 hours. Brennan checked his watch, 0647. They needed to hold for 3 hours and 13 minutes. 7 Americans against 80 Germans. Direct orders said wait until the enemy reached 200 yards before engaging. Defensive posture only. 30 yards to his left, Corporal Danny Castillo's body lay cooling in the snow. 22 years old, El Paso born, planning to buy Pete's Auto Repair on Alameda Street after the war. Had the down payment saved. $340 in a money belt he'd worn every day for 11 months. Danny died 15 minutes ago because his rifle told the enemy exactly when to shoot him. Through the fog, Brennan saw movement. German machine gun crew. 400 yards out. 2 men carrying an MG-42, that beast that fired 1,200 rounds per minute and sounded like canvas tearing. They were setting up behind a stone wall. If that gun opened fire, 7 Americans would be pinned down, suppressed, overrun in minutes. Orders said, wait for 200 yards. Orders said defensive posture only. Orders said use Army-issue equipment as designed. Brennan looked at Danny's body in the snow, looked at the modified rifle in his hands, made his choice. He centered his iron sights on the German machine gunner 400 yards away, saw the man's field gray uniform, saw brass buttons catch weak morning light, saw breath vapor rising in the cold. Cold metal trigger against his finger. 1 pound of pressure. 2 pounds, 3. The M1 Garand cracked once. 400 yards out, the German machine gunner's head snapped back. Body dropped like someone cut his strings. The assistant gunner froze confused. The shot had come from so far away, muffled by fog, that he couldn't tell the direction. He stood there exposed, trying to understand where death had come from. Brennan chambered another round. Fired again. Second German down. Private Jimmy Holland, 30 yards away in his own foxhole, stared at Brennan with eyes gone wide. Sarge orders were wait for 150 yards. You just shot at 400. Brennan reloaded. 8-round clip slid into the top of the receiver with a metallic click. Then the external magazine, 6 more rounds mounted on the side rail. 14 rounds total where doctrine said there should be 8. They were setting up MG-42, Brennan said, voice flat. 30 seconds and that gun opens up, we're all dead. But if officers find out about that magazine, they're gonna hang you for it. Brennan looked at Danny's body again, at the fresh ammunition clip still clutched in Danny's frozen hand, the clip he never got to load because a German rifleman had been counting shots and knew exactly when Danny would be vulnerable. Yeah, Brennan said, they're going to hang me for this, but you 7 are going to live. The German assault wave kept coming. 70-plus infantry, 250 yards, now shapes moving through fog like ghosts. Brennan settled into his firing position and thought about the conversation he had had with Danny 6 days earlier. The conversation that had kept him awake for 3 nights straight. But to understand how one factory mechanic from Indiana broke every rule and saved 840 lives, we need to go back. Back to Gary, Indiana, 1925, where a 9-year-old boy learned to hear what machines were trying to say. Gary, Indiana, population 55,000. One industry, United States Steel. The sky glowed orange at night from blast furnaces that never stopped burning. The whole town smelled like molten iron and coal smoke. Some people said it was the smell of money. Bobby Brennan's father said it was the smell of work. Patrick Brennan operated a blast furnace, 12-hour shifts 6 days a week. He came home every night covered in soot and small burns, hands wrapped in bandages, face lined with exhaustion that went deeper than one shift. He'd wash in the kitchen sink because they didn't have a real bathroom, eat whatever Bobby's mother had managed to cook, and fall asleep in his chair before 8 p.m. Bobby was born February 12, 1916, 3 months before his father took that blast furnace job. Grew up in a two-room house 4 blocks from the mill, fell asleep every night to the sound of machinery, and woke up every morning to orange sky. The Depression hit in 1929. Bobby was 13. His father's hours got cut to 8 per shift 4 days a week. The money didn't stretch far enough. So Bobby started working summers in the maintenance shop doing whatever they'd let a skinny kid do. Fetching tools, cleaning equipment, sweeping floors. That's where he learned to listen. Summer of 1930. Bobby was 14 years old mopping oil off the maintenance shop floor when a senior mechanic named Ernst called him over. "Kid, you got good ears, I guess. Number 3 rolling mill, something's wrong with it. Engineers say the instruments show everything normal, but I hear something off. You tell me what you hear." They walked to the rolling mill, massive machine size of a house, steel rollers crushing hot metal into sheets. The noise was incredible. Screaming metal hydraulic hissed the deep throb of steam engines. Ernst gestured at it like he was presenting evidence in court. Bobby stood there, closed his eyes, listened. The rolling mill had a rhythm, a pattern. Compression, release, but underneath that pattern, something else. A grinding sound barely audible over the main roar. Not constant, every 17 seconds, like clockwork. He opened his eyes. Bad bearing in the drive shaft. 3 weeks until catastrophic failure. The engineer standing nearby laughed. "Kid's guessing. Instruments show bearing temperature normal." "It's not temperature," Bobby said. "It's vibration. The bearings have got a stress fracture. Every rotation, the fracture opens and closes. That's the grinding sound. In 3 weeks, it fails completely." Ernst looked at the engineer. "Shut it down. Check the bearing." They found the hairline crack exactly where Bobby said it would be. 17 days later, not 3 weeks, but close enough. The foreman promoted Bobby to apprentice mechanic at age 14. Started calling him Ears Brennan because he could identify problems before the engineer's instruments detected them. 2 years later, 1932, Bobby was 16. Blast Furnace 7 started making an odd sound. Subtle. So faint that 3 shifts of mechanics couldn't locate the source. Production supervisor wanted to ignore it. Furnace was meeting output targets. Instruments showed normal operation. Bobby climbed the scaffolding 40 feet up, pressed his hands against different sections of the furnace. Housing feeling vibrations travel through metal into his palms. Stress fracture in the cooling jacket. North side 40 feet up, 2 days before failure. They shut down the furnace, found the hairline crack exactly where Bobby said. The chief engineer stared at him like he was examining something he didn't quite believe. "How the hell did you know?" "Machine was telling me," Bobby said. "Just had to listen." One more example. 1934, Bobby, age 18. The mill installed a new electric crane, worked fine for 3 weeks. Then Bobby started hearing a clicking sound. Every 47 seconds, regular as a metronome. So subtle that other mechanics walking right past the crane didn't notice it. Bobby spent his lunch break tracking the source. Found it in the motor mount. Bolts vibrating loose. In 400 cycles, about 9 hours, bolt fails, motor drops, crane collapses. They tightened the bolt. Found it had been working itself free exactly as Bobby diagnosed. His father said something to him that night that Bobby would remember for the rest of his life. They were sitting at the kitchen table, Patrick's hands wrapped in fresh bandages from that day's burns. "You got a gift, son. You see how things should work, not how you're told they work. Some people follow manuals. You follow truth. That'll make you a damn good mechanic. Might also get you fired someday, but you'll sleep better." Bobby didn't understand that warning until December 1944, when following truth instead of manuals would save 840 lives and nearly cost him everything. December 8, 1941. Bobby was working the morning shift at the mill when news came over the radio. Pearl Harbor, Japanese attack, America at war. He enlisted 2 days later. December 10, 1941, age 25. Could have gotten a deferment, essential war industry, but didn't want it. The recruiting sergeant asked him what he wanted to do. Bobby looked at the man and said, "Infantry." "You're a mechanic. We need mechanics." Mechanics fix machines after they break, Bobby said. Infantry keeps them from breaking in the first place. He had no idea what that meant. It sounded good at the time. Basic training at Fort Benning, Georgia, January through April 1942. Bobby scored expert marksman on the rifle range, perfect scores on equipment maintenance, marginal on tactical doctrine, because he kept arguing with instructors about things that didn't make sense. His drill sergeant wrote in Bobby's file, "Private Brennan demonstrates exceptional technical aptitude and marksmanship. However, tendency toward unorthodox methods and questioning established doctrine requires monitoring." Translation: brilliant soldier. Doesn't follow rules. May 1942 assigned to the 23rd Infantry Regiment, 2nd Infantry Division, shipped to Europe, deployed to North Africa in June, then Sicily, then Normandy, then France, then Belgium. By December 1944, Staff Sergeant Robert Brennan had been in combat for 30 months, had seen things that made the blast furnaces of Gary, Indiana look like candles, had watched men die in ways that nightmares couldn't touch. And he had learned something that his training had never taught him. The M1 Garand rifle, called by General Patton the greatest battle implement ever devised, was brilliant, semi-automatic, gas-operated, chambered in .30-06, gave American infantry massive firepower advantage over German bolt-action rifles. Every soldier in Europe carried one. Every training manual praised it. But by December 1944, Bobby Brennan had watched that greatest battle implement ever devised kill 14 men in his company. Not because the rifle failed, because it worked exactly as designed. The M1 Garand held 8 rounds in an unblocked clip that fed from the top. After the 8th round fired, the clip automatically ejected with a distinctive metallic ring. That sound, that ping, echoed across battlefields like a dinner bell. Every German soldier within 400 yards knew exactly what it meant. The American rifleman was defenseless for the next 4 seconds while he fumbled to reload. German infantry were trained to count American shots. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Then the ping, then rush the position during those 4 vulnerable seconds. It was a brilliant tactic because it exploited a fundamental design limitation. And Bobby Brennan watched it kill men he knew, Private James Donovan. December 3, 1944, near the Roer River, emptied his 8-round clip into a German position, ducked behind a log to reload. The ping rang out. A German machine gunner who'd been counting Donovan's shots put a 3-round burst through his chest during those 4 seconds. Corporal Willie Bass, December 8th, took a rifle grenade while trying to reload behind cover. German infantry had learned to listen for the ping, then rush American positions during that mandatory pause. Willie was from Alabama, had a pregnant wife back home, died with a fresh clip in his hand, 3 feet from safety. Lieutenant Wesley Hughes, December 11th. The 3rd platoon leader Bobby had served under in 2 months. Hughes had tried to teach his men to stagger their reloads. One man covering while others changed clips. It worked until they encountered SS troops who'd been trained to suppress the covering position first, then rush during the reload gaps. Hughes died trying to chamber a round with frozen fingers. By mid-December, the 23rd Infantry Regiment had suffered a 34% casualty rate. An unofficial survey by the battalion's surgeon showed that 40% of riflemen fatalities occurred within 15 seconds of reloading. Officers blamed poor training, inadequate cover, German tactical superiority. Bobby Brennan blamed mathematics. 8 rounds meant 8 opportunities for the enemy to count. 8 rounds meant 1 catastrophic reload gap every 30 seconds of sustained fire. 8 rounds meant predictability, and predictability meant death. Then came Danny Castillo, December 12, 1944. 3 days before the Battle of the Bulge would explode across the Ardennes and catch the entire American army by surprise. Bobby and Danny were sharing a foxhole during a rare quiet evening, eating cold K rations and talking about home. "First thing I'm doing when we get back," Danny said, "is buying that garage on Alameda Street. You know the one? Pete's Auto Repair. Pete wants to retire, selling it for cheap. I already got the down payment saved." Bobby nodded, only half listening. His mind was on the rifle problem. He'd been watching the company bar gunner all day. The Browning automatic rifle held a 20-round magazine. The bar gunner swapped magazines at irregular intervals, sometimes after 12 rounds, sometimes 8, sometimes 15. He never emptied completely. The Germans couldn't predict his reload timing. "You even listening, Bobby?" "Yeah, Pete's garage. You're going to fix cars." "Damn right. No more rifles. No more pings. No more—" Danny trailed off. He was staring at his M1 Garand propped against the foxhole wall. "You ever think about that sound?" Danny asked quietly. "The ping every day." "I had this dream last night," Danny said. His voice had gone soft, like he was confessing something shameful. "I'm behind cover. German machine guns shooting at me. I fire my 8 rounds. Boom, boom, boom. Then the ping. And in the dream, I know what's coming. I know the machine gunner's been counting. I try to reload, but my hands won't work. I can see the German traversing his gun toward me, and I just wait." Danny looked at Bobby. For the first time in 11 months of combat, Bobby saw genuine fear in his friend's eyes. Not the normal fear that every soldier carried, something deeper. The fear of knowing exactly how you're going to die. "It's going to happen, isn't it?" Danny said. "That ping's going to kill me." Bobby wanted to say no, wanted to tell his friend he was being paranoid, that he'd survive North Africa and Sicily and Normandy, that he'd make it home to open that garage and fix cars for the rest of his life. But they both knew the statistics. They'd both seen too many men die during that 4-second gap. "Not if I can help it," Bobby said. Danny smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "How it's an M1, 8 rounds. You can't change that." Bobby didn't answer, but his mind was already working. 6 days later, Danny was dead. The ping killed him exactly like his dream. December 18th, 1944. 0632 hours. Pre-dawn darkness. Fog thick enough to taste. German patrol probing American lines. 12 men 300 yards out moving carefully through the mist. Danny and Bobby were in separate foxholes 30 yards apart. Danny saw the Germans first. Opened fire with his M1 Garand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 rounds, standard capacity. Perfect fire discipline. Then the ping, that metallic ring as the empty clip ejected and hit the frozen ground. The sound echoed across the field like a bell. Every German within 400 yards knew what it meant. Danny's hands reached for a fresh clip on his cartridge belt. His fingers were stiff from the cold. Frozen joints wouldn't cooperate the way they should. He grabbed the clip, tried to insert it into the rifle's top loading mechanism. Fumbled. Dropped it in the snow. Bobby, 30 yards away, watched it happen and knew what was coming. Couldn't shoot because that would give away his own position. Could only watch. A German Mauser cracked once. Single shot 280 yards out. The German rifleman had been counting Danny's shots, waiting for the ping, waiting for those 4 seconds when an American soldier would be defenseless and vulnerable, and trying desperately to reload. Danny fell forward. There was a neat hole through the right side of his neck. Arterial spray dark against white snow. The fresh ammunition clip was still clutched in his frozen hand. He'd never gotten it into the rifle. Bobby broke cover, ran to Danny's position. Stupid, dangerous, didn't care. Reached Danny and pressed both hands on the neck wound, trying to stop the bleeding. Blood pumped through his fingers with each heartbeat. Arterial bleed. Nothing he could do. No way to stop it. Danny's eyes found Bobby's. He tried to speak. "Tell Maria, the shop, I almost—" He didn't finish the sentence. His body went limp. 0634 hours. Bobby stayed there for 10 seconds that felt like 10 hours. Danny's blood warm on his hands, then cooling, then sticky. The smell of copper and cordite and frozen earth. The sound of his own breathing too loud in the sudden silence. Then he crawled back to his foxhole. Sat there with his hands covered in Danny's blood. Couldn't wash it off. No water. Had to sit there and feel it drying on his skin. He looked at his own M1 Garand, at that greatest battle implement ever devised. The rifle that had just killed his best friend by telling the enemy exactly when he was defenseless. Bobby Brennan made a decision. No more soldiers die because of the 8-round limit. No more Mariahs waiting for auto shops that would never open. No more dreams about the ping. He didn't care about courts-martial. Didn't care about firing squads. Didn't care about regulations or doctrine or proper channels. That morning at 0645 hours, with Danny's blood still wet on his hands, Bobby Brennan decided he was going to fix the rifle. Tonight. In secret. Without permission. And if they hanged him for it, at least he'd die knowing he had tried. But the decision to build the forbidden magazine hadn't started that morning. It had started 3 weeks earlier when Bobby realized that asking permission meant waiting for permission that would never come, and waiting meant watching more men die. November 27th, 1944. 21 days before Danny's death. Bobby had been thinking about the reload problem for months, had watched it kill Donovan Bass Hughes, had talked to his company commander, Captain Morris, about the possibility of modifying the magazine system to allow unpredictable reload timing. Captain Morris shut him down immediately. "We use Army-issue equipment as design sergeant. These rifles came from Springfield Armory, not a maintenance depot in Indiana." Dismissed. That night, Bobby worked in an abandoned barn outside the village of Krinkelt. Worked by flashlight from 2300 hours until 03:15. 4 hours and 15 minutes. Hands shaking from cold and from the knowledge that what he was doing was explicitly, unquestionably, catastrophically illegal. Under the Uniform Code of Military Justice, Article 108, destruction or modification of government property could mean 5 years at hard labor. In a combat zone, unauthorized weapon modification could mean execution by firing squad. Bobby knew this, didn't care. He'd been scavenging parts for 3 weeks. Sheet metal from a destroyed Jeep door, a spring from a damaged BR magazine, a catch mechanism from a shot-up M1 carbine, modified pins from a rifle trigger assembly, a file screwdriver, and pliers from his maintenance kit. Total cost $0. All salvaged. His plan was simple in concept, complex in execution. Create a detachable external magazine that mounted to the side of the rifle receiver, feeding additional rounds after the standard 8-round clip was exhausted. Total capacity 14 rounds. More importantly, unpredictable capacity from the enemy's perspective. The work was painstaking. Hour 1 from 2300 to midnight, cutting the magazine housing from Jeep door sheet metal. The metal was cold enough to burn his fingers, sharp enough to slice them open. His hands bled from a dozen small cuts. Hour 2, midnight to 0100, forming the feed lips to precise angles using only a file. This was the most critical part. Wrong angle and rounds would jam. Had to be exact, had to be perfect. He worked by flashlight filing metal, a fraction of a millimeter at a time, testing the angle against a cartridge, filing again. Hour 3, 0100 to 0200, installing the BAR spring and calibrating the tension. 2 weakened rounds wouldn't feed. Too strong and they'd jam the action. He compressed the spring 43 times, testing tension, adjusting testing again. His thumb bled from where the file slipped during adjustment, number 37. Hour 4, 0200 to 0300, creating the quick detach mount using modified trigger assembly pins. The magazine needed to attach and detach in under 5 seconds for cleaning and maintenance. He worked the mechanism over and over until his fingers moved by muscle memory alone. At 03:15 hours, he had a working prototype. Dawn, November 28th. Bobby took the modified rifle to a remote gully 2 miles from camp. Test fired 84 rounds. 0 malfunctions. The pattern worked exactly as he'd designed it. Rifle fired the standard 8 rounds. The clip ejected with its telltale ping. Then rounds 9 through 14 fed smoothly from the external magazine. Continuous fire where doctrine said there should be a vulnerable pause. He wrapped the rifle in oilcloth, told no one. Not Danny, not his squad, not the officers. Just carried it on patrol, waiting for the moment when he'd need it. That moment came 20 days later. December 18th, 1944, 0647 hours. When Bobby Brennan looked through the MOG and saw German machine gunners setting up 400 yards away and made the choice to break every rule he'd ever sworn to follow. Because sometimes following truth matters more than following orders. And sometimes a mechanic from Gary, Indiana understands what machines need better than the people who designed them. 0650 hours. The German assault wave kept coming through the fog. 70 infantry, maybe 80 shapes moving like shadows through the mist. 250 yards out now. Close enough that Brennan could hear equipment rattling, boots crunching frozen ground, NCOs shouting orders in German. The radio in his foxhole crackled again. Static, then a voice. All positions maintain defensive posture. Repeat defensive posture only. Reinforcements ETA 1000 hours. Brennan checked his watch. 3 hours and 10 minutes. 7 Americans needed to hold this position for 3 hours and 10 minutes against a company of SS Panzer troops who'd fought on the Eastern Front and knew exactly how to exploit American reload gaps. His squad was spread across a 100-yard frontage in individual foxholes. 5 men still combat effective after the morning's casualties. Danny dead 30 yards away. 2 others killed when the left flank took mortar fire at 0600. Now just 7 total, and Brennan knew with absolute certainty that at least 3 more would die in the next hour, unless something changed. He looked at the men he had left, needed to know who he was fighting for. Needed faces, not just bodies in foxholes. 30 yards to his right, Private James Holland, 23 years old, Nashville, Tennessee. High school math teacher before the draft. Holland had a wife named Sarah and a daughter named Lucy who was exactly 2 weeks old. Bobby had seen the photo yesterday. Baby wrapped in a pink blanket, eyes closed, tiny fists curled against her chest. Holland kept that photo in his helmet liner, checked it before every engagement, whispered the same words every time. "See you soon, Lucy." Holland had been in combat since Normandy, 6 months. Survived D-Day, survived the hedgerow fighting, survived the push across France. Now he was 47 days from rotation home, had a calendar in his pack where he crossed off each day. 47 days until he could hold his daughter for the first time. 40 yards left, Corporal Marcus Davis, 29 years old, Chicago. Former police officer, South Side, beat cop before the war. Davis was married 7 years to a woman named Helen, who was pregnant right now, due in March. He already had a Purple Heart from Normandy shrapnel in his left shoulder that still ached when the weather turned cold. He'd promised Helen no more close calls, promised he was coming home to meet their baby. Davis carried a morphine syringe in his jacket pocket. Told Bobby 3 days ago, "If I go down during a reload, use this. Don't let me bleed out slow like Bass did." Said it matter-of-fact like he was discussing the weather. 20 yards behind Brennan's position, PFC Stephen Kowalski, 19 years old, Detroit. Worked in an automotive factory until the layoffs in '44, got drafted the same week he lost his job. This was his first combat deployment. Arrived November 15th, 33 days ago, youngest of 6 siblings in a Polish immigrant family. His father worked the Ford plant. Stephen was the first to serve in the military, the family's hope, the one who was supposed to come home with stories about how he'd fought for America. The kid was terrified. His hands shook every time he reloaded. He'd nearly died twice already, frozen up during firefights, couldn't make his fingers work when he needed to chamber a round. Brennan had taken him under wing because the kid reminded him of himself at 19. Scared but competent, just needed confidence. These 3, Holland with his 2-week-old daughter, Davis with his pregnant wife, Kowalski with his shaking hands and 33 days of experience. If Brennan didn't use the forbidden magazine, if he followed regulations and let that rifle ping every 8 rounds like doctrine demanded, at least one of these 3 would be dead by noon. Probably all 3, he made his decision, had already made it at 0647 when he shot those German machine gunners at 400 yards. Now he committed to it fully. The Germans came at 0652, first wave 30 infantry moving fast through fog. They came in a skirmish line 5 yards between each man, rifles up, using the mist for concealment. Professional soldiers. Experienced. They knew what they were doing. Brennan tracked them through his iron sights. 200 yards, 190, 180, waited for them to close. Needed clear shots. Couldn't waste ammunition. At 170 yards, he opened fire. First shot, German soldier left side of the line. Center mass. The M1 kicked into his shoulder. Brass casing ejected, hit the frozen dirt with a small metallic clink. The German dropped without a sound. Second shot, squad leader identifiable by his position and the way other soldiers oriented toward him. Brennan put the round through his chest. The man went down and the assault line immediately lost cohesion. Soldiers looking for whoever was giving orders now, 3rd through 8th shots. Brennan worked methodically across the line. Aimed fire. Controlled breathing. Each shot a separate decision. He dropped 5 more Germans. One took 2 rounds to stop. Body armor maybe, or just adrenaline keeping him moving until the second bullet found something vital. 8 rounds fired. The clip ejected with that distinctive ping. The sound echoed across the frozen field, sharp and metallic and unmistakable. Every German soldier within 400 yards heard it. They knew what it meant. American riflemen empty vulnerable for 4 seconds, perfect time to rush the position. 3 German soldiers broke from cover, sprinting toward Brennan's foxhole. This was doctrine. This was training. Exploit the reload gap. Close the distance while the American is defenseless. Except Brennan wasn't defenseless. The external magazine fed round 9 into the chamber. He kept firing, dropped the first German at 140 yards, second at 120, third at 90 yards, close enough that Brennan could see the expression of confusion on the man's face in the instant before the bullet hit. The remaining Germans in the assault line stopped, froze. Their training said the Americans should be reloading right now, should be vulnerable, should be silent. Instead, the rifle kept shooting. 9, 10, 11 rounds. Continuous fire where there should have been a gap. Brennan fired rounds 12, 13, 14. 3 more Germans down. The assault line broke. Men scattered back into the fog, dragging wounded with them, momentum completely destroyed. From 30 yards away, Jimmy Holland's voice cut through the sound of gunfire. "Sarge, what the hell was that? Your rifle just fired 14 rounds. Brennan ducked down, started his actual reload. 8-round clip first sliding into the top receiver with a solid click. Then the external magazine, 6 more rounds mounted on the side rail. Total vulnerable time, maybe 6 seconds, and by then the Germans were already retreating. "Focus on your sector, Holland," Brennan called back. "I'll explain later." Maybe. He wouldn't explain. Couldn't. Because explaining meant admitting he'd built an illegal modification, and admitting that meant court-martial, and court-martial meant these 3 men would die while he sat in a stockade waiting for trial. 0700 hours. 8 minutes since the first German probe. The fog was starting to thin, visibility improving to maybe 100 yards. That was bad. Better visibility meant Germans could coordinate their assault, could use proper fire and maneuver tactics instead of just pushing through the mist, hoping for the best. Brennan heard them coming before he saw them. Lot of voices this time, lot of boots. He risked a look over the foxhole rim and felt his stomach drop. 80-plus infantry, 2 assault waves, multiple MG-42 machine gun positions setting up in the tree line 400 yards back. This wasn't a probe anymore. This was a full company assault designed to roll over the American position through sheer weight of numbers. The MG-42s opened fire first. That sound like canvas tearing impossibly fast. 1,200 rounds per minute. Tracers snapping overhead, glowing green in the morning light. The machine guns were suppressing the entire American line, forcing everyone to keep their heads down. Under that covering fire, German infantry advanced. Fast. Disciplined. 50 yards, then stop and fire. Then another 50 yards. Bounding overwatch, proper tactics, exactly what you'd expect from SS troops. Brennan spotted the biggest threat immediately. German assault team moving on Jimmy Holland's position. 8 men working in pairs using smoke grenades for concealment. They were flanking left, trying to get an angle on Holland's foxhole, while the MG-42s kept him pinned. Holland didn't see them. Couldn't see them through the smoke. He was focused on the main assault force to his front. Brennan swung his rifle left, engaged the flanking team. First German at 320 yards. Brennan was firing the external magazine, rounds 9 through 14, the ones the Germans didn't expect. Round 9, German squad leader. Unteroffizier, rank identifiable by the insignia on his collar. He went down hard. Round 10, rifleman 300 yards, center mass hit. Dropped. Round 11, another rifleman diving for cover. Brennan led him slightly fired where he was going to be instead of where he was. The German jerked and fell, rolled twice, stopped moving. The flanking squad broke, retreated. 4 men down and 10-second survivors not willing to push that attack anymore. Holland saw them, finally saw what had almost happened, looked at Brennan with an expression somewhere between shock and gratitude. He didn't say anything, didn't need to, just checked his rifle, took a deep breath, went back to engaging targets to his front. Brennan reloaded, fresh 8-round clip, fresh React 6-round magazine, 14 more rounds. He was burning through ammunition faster than he liked, but didn't have a choice. The Germans kept coming. 0705. Marcus Davis was providing covering fire for a wounded soldier, PFC Torres, who'd taken a leg wound and needed extraction. Davis fired his M1 8 rounds, deliberate aim shots at German positions. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Then the ping. Davis started to reload. His hands fumbled. The old shoulder wound from Normandy was aching in the cold. Fingers stiff. He dropped the first clip, cursed, grabbed another from his belt. 300 yards out, a German submachine gunner with an MP-40 heard that ping. Rose from cover, raised his weapon, took aim at Davis, who was still trying to get the clip seated. Brennan's round 12 caught the German in the chest. The man fell backward, MP-40 firing wild into the air as he went down. Davis got his clip loaded, chambered around, helped drag Torres back to cover. Later, when there was time, he'd look at Brennan and say, "Second time today, you've saved my ass." And Brennan would tell him to stay sharp, that Helen was waiting, that the baby needed a father. But right now, there was no time for conversation. The German assault was intensifying. 0710. Stephen Kowalski was shaking badly. He'd fired his 8 rounds, emptied his rifle, trying to reload now. But his hands wouldn't cooperate. 19 years old, 33 days in combat, watching German infantry close to 200 yards while his frozen fingers fumbled with a metal clip that kept slipping. He dropped the clip in the snow, scrambled to find it, grabbed it with both hands, tried again. Couldn't get it to seat. The rifle's mechanism was cold metal, contracted everything harder than it should be. A German rifleman 200 yards out saw the motion, saw Kowalski exposed and struggling, took careful aim. Brennan's round 13. The German dropped. Kowalski finally got the clip loaded, chambered around, looked at Brennan with eyes that were pure terror and pure gratitude mixed together in equal measure. "Breathe, Kowalski," Brennan called across the space between them. "You're doing fine. Next time, 2 hands on the clip. Steady your right hand with your left." The kid nodded, tried again during the next lull in fire. This time the clip slid home smoothly. 0715. Brennan had fired through 3 complete load cycles. 42 rounds, 13 confirmed kills in 25 minutes. The Germans were still coming, but their assault had lost momentum. Too many casualties, too much confusion. That American position that should have been overrun by now was still fighting, still putting out accurate fire, still refusing to break. The German company commander, wherever he was, made a tactical decision. Pull back, regroup, try a different approach. The assault wave withdrew to 300 yards, then 400, then back into the tree line. Left bodies scattered across the approach routes. Left equipment, left blood trails in the snow. Temporary lull. Maybe 10 minutes before they came again. Brennan used the time to check his rifle. The barrel was hot. Not glowing yet, but hot enough that he could feel heat radiating off the metal even in 14-degree weather. He'd fired more rounds in 25 minutes than most soldiers fired in a week. The external magazine was holding up spring tension, still good feed mechanism, still working. But he didn't know how long it would last under sustained use. Jimmy Holland crawled over to Brennan's foxhole during the lull. "Sarge, I need to know, that magazine on your rifle, where'd it come from?" "I made it." "When 3 weeks ago." "Does Captain Morris know?" "No." "Does anyone know?" "You do. Now get back to your position before they come again." Holland didn't move. "That flanking team, they were coming for me. I didn't see them. You saved my life." "Lucy needs her father," Brennan said. "Now go." Holland went. 0720. The Germans came again. Different tactics this time. They'd learned from the first assault. Now they were using smoke, grenades, white phosphorus, creating thick cover-cutting visibility to 30 yards. Under that smoke, they pushed multiple assault teams simultaneously, trying to overwhelm the American position through coordinated pressure. It almost worked. German infantry broke through on the left flank, overran a foxhole position. Brennan heard American voices screaming, heard the distinctive crack, crack, crack of German MP-40 submachine guns, heard the screaming stop. 2 Americans dead. PFC Wilson, PFC Mendez. Good men, gone in seconds. Brennan's squad was down to 5 effectives now. Him, Holland, Davis, Kowalski, and PFC O'Brien. 5 men against 60-plus Germans who were adapting, learning, getting smarter about how they attacked. The mathematics were brutal and simple. 5 couldn't hold a 100-yard frontage. Not against this many. Not for 3 more hours. Brennan made the call. All positions fall back to center foxholes. Consolidate. Overlapping fields of fire. Move now. Risky. gave Germans freedom to maneuver on the flanks. But 5 men couldn't cover the whole line. Better to concentrate, create a defensive knot that was harder to crack. They moved during a lull in the German fire. 20 seconds of exposure. Everyone made it. 0745. Brennan was running low on ammunition. 3 8-round clips remaining. 2 6-round external magazines remaining. 36 rounds total. After that, he'd be scavenging ammunition from dead soldiers or fixing bayonets and getting medieval. The Germans pressed harder. They could sense the American line weakening, could see the consolidation, could smell blood in the water. Brennan fired his 14th round, down to his last complete load cycle. 8-round clip plus 6-round magazine. After this, he'd have to reload both systems, and that meant 10 seconds of vulnerability. 10 seconds was an eternity in combat. He inserted the last 8-round clip, felt it click home, reached for the last external magazine. His hands were shaking now. Not from fear, from exhaustion and adrenaline and the sustained intensity of 90 minutes of combat. His fingers fumbled the magazine, nearly dropped it, caught it at the last second, got it mounted, 6 more rounds, 14 total. Last magazine, make it count. German voices close now, very close. Someone shouting in German, "Jetzt, jetzt, now, now." They were rushing the position. Brennan came up firing. 3 Germans at 50 yards running full sprint bayonets fixed screaming as they charged. Round 1, first German center mass, dropped. Rounds 2 and 3, second German, first shot hit but didn't stop him. Adrenaline or body armor or just pure momentum keeping him moving. Second shot found something vital. He went down 10 yards from Brennan's foxhole. Round 4, third German, almost on top of the position. Brennan's bullet caught him in the chest. The man fell backward dead before he hit the ground. His boot landed on Danny Castillo's frozen hand. On Danny's body still lying there in the snow 30 yards away. Brennan stared at that for half a second. Danny's hand frozen, solid fingers still clutching the ammunition clip he never got to load. German boot resting on top of it. The wrongness of it. The absolute obscene wrongness of everything. Something inside him went cold, went mechanical. Went to a place beyond fear or anger or grief. Just pure function. Target identification, engagement, next target. No thought, no feeling, just the work. For the next 40 minutes, Staff Sergeant Robert Brennan stopped being a human being and became a machine. 0745 through 0815, 30 minutes. Brennan methodically eliminated every German soldier who moved, not suppressing fire. Precision shots. Each round a separate kill decision. German soldier rose to reposition his rifle. Brennan shot him. 1 round center mass. German NCO tried to rally his troops, stood up to wave them forward. Brennan shot him. 1 round throat. German medic moved toward wounded. Brennan aimed 2 feet to the medic's right, put a round into the frozen ground. Warning shot. The medic froze, then retreated. Brennan still had rules, wouldn't shoot medics, but wouldn't let them extract intelligence from wounded either. German Panzerfaust team 2 men carrying an anti-tank rocket launcher setting up to engage American positions. Brennan shot the operator in the shoulder. The assistant grabbed the weapon. Brennan shot him. The rocket fired wild, impacted an empty field 300 yards away. German machine gun crew attempting a barrel change. MG-42 barrels overheated after 250 rounds of continuous fire required a 30-second change. Brennan shot the gunner during the change. Shot the assistant reaching for the gun. 3rd crew member retreated. Gun abandoned. German infantry squad 8 men coordinated rush. Brennan engaged methodically. 5 rounds, 4 hits. Squad broke. 3 survivors retreated. This wasn't heroic, wasn't brave. It was cold, calculated application of firepower to achieve a single tactical objective. Make the cost of advancing higher than the cost of retreating. The Germans tried everything. Coordinated rushes, suppressive fire from multiple machine guns, smoke grenades and flanking maneuvers. Nothing worked. The American position held because one man with a forbidden rifle modification could fire 14 rounds before Germans expected him to be vulnerable, and that 6-round advantage was enough to break their assault timing every single time. By 0815, the German assault wave was withdrawing under covering fire. They left bodies scattered across the approach routes in rough semicircles at 200, 300, and 400 yards. Textbook fields of fire. Perfect kill zones. Brennan had fired approximately 420 rounds. Estimated 45 confirmed kills. His squad had contributed another 15 to 20, but the Germans weren't done. The second assault came at 10:30 after the promised reinforcements failed to arrive. Road networks were jammed, bridges, blown, entire divisions stuck in traffic trying to respond to the German offensive that would later be called the Battle of the Bulge. This time the Germans brought armor. Two Stug 3 assault guns. Sturmgeschütz, self-propelled artillery with 75mm main guns and 80mm of frontal armor. Against Stug armor, an M1 Garand rifle was a BB gun. Useless. The Stugs could sit at 800 yards well outside rifle range and shell the American position until nothing remained. High explosive 75mm rounds would obliterate foxholes, kill through concussion alone, even on near misses suppress any return fire. Jimmy Holland saw them coming. "Sarge, we can't fight tanks with rifles." "I know," Brennan said. Marcus Davis, pale from blood loss but still functional, asked the obvious question. "So what do we do?" "We wait, see if they're stupid." The Stugs stopped at 800 yards. Didn't advance. Brennan watched through borrowed binoculars. Saw the Stug commanders visible in open hatches scanning terrain. Saw German infantry dismounting from the vehicles. Saw the infantry moving forward on foot while the S-Tugs remained stationary. German tactical caution. The S-Tug commanders had been trained on the Eastern Front fighting Soviet tanks. They knew that aggressive armor advances without infantry screening meant death from hidden anti-tank weapons. There were reports of American tank destroyers in the area, unconfirmed but possible. So the Germans made the safe choice. Send infantry forward first to clear the area, then bring the armor. That single decision saved the American position. Without armored support, the German infantry assault followed the same pattern as the morning engagement. Waves of troops trying to close distance against entrenched rifles. And Brennan's modified M1 still gave him the advantage of unpredictable reload timing. The afternoon engagement lasted 3 hours, 10:35 through 13:40. Brennan fired 380 additional rounds, estimated 35 additional kills. His rifle barrel was so hot by 13:15 that he could see heat shimmer rising from the metal. He poured canteen water over it during a reload, heard the hiss of steam, watched metal contract rapidly from thermal shock. Dangerous. Could crack the barrel. He kept firing anyway. Stephen Kowalski had stopped shaking. The kid who'd frozen during reloads that morning was now engaging targets with steady hands and cold precision. Brennan watched him work and saw the transformation. Kowalski wasn't a scared teenager anymore. Combat had burned that away, left someone harder. Marcus Davis, despite his shoulder wounds, spent the afternoon in his foxhole loading magazines. Couldn't shoot anymore. Arm too damaged. But he could load 8-round clips and 6-round external magazines, keep Brennan and Kowalski supplied with ammunition. Blood soaking through his field dressing, hands shaking from pain and blood loss. But he kept working. "Not dying in Belgium," Davis muttered. "Helen would kill me." At 14:40, American artillery finally responded to their calls for fire support. The first rounds impacted 600 yards out, right in the middle of the German assembly area. The assault broke immediately. Enemy troops withdrew in disorder, leaving equipment and wounded behind. By 15:15, forward observers confirmed the German force had pulled back over 2 miles. The junction was secure. Relief forces from 1st Infantry Division arrived at 16:20. Found Brennan's position surrounded by German dead. The battalion intelligence officer, Captain Lawrence Morrison, walked the battlefield with a photographer documenting positions, counting bodies. Official count 95 confirmed German KIA directly attributed to small arms fire from Brennan's position. Another 40 to 60 estimated wounded who'd been evacuated. 7 American soldiers had held against a company-strength assault for 9 hours. It shouldn't have been possible. Captain Morrison stood next to Brennan's foxhole and stared at the modified M1 Garand, at the external magazine mounted on the side rail, at the scorched metal and heat-stressed barrel, and the mechanism that had fired 800 rounds in 9 hours and somehow still functioned. "Sergeant Brennan," Morrison said slowly, "what am I looking at?" Brennan was too exhausted to lie, too exhausted to care anymore. He explained the modification, the external magazine, the extended capacity. The unpredictable reload timing, built from salvaged parts, used without authorization, completely illegal under Article 108 of the Uniform Code of Military Justice. Morrison examined the rifle carefully, tested the magazine detachment, inspected the feed mechanism. His expression was unreadable. Long pause. 5 seconds of silence that felt like 5 hours. Then Morrison asked one question. How long would it take you to make 50 of these? Within 72 hours, Staff Sergeant Robert Brennan was pulled off the front line and assigned to a field workshop in Elsenborn, Belgium. His orders came verbally, not in writing. No paperwork, no official documentation, just results. Captain Morrison made it clear. Make the modification reproducible. Train armorers to install it. I don't want memos. I don't want reports. I want rifles that keep my men alive. Understand? Brennan understood. December 20th through 27th, 1944. 7 days that would change infantry doctrine without anyone in division headquarters knowing it was happening. Brennan set up in an abandoned Belgian farmhouse that had been converted to an armory. The building still smelled like livestock and hay, but it had a roof and 4 walls and space to work. He scavenged equipment from destroyed vehicles, drill press from a shot-up half-track, files and metalworking tools from division supply, a welding torch acetylene dangerous in the cold but necessary, sheet metal from 14 destroyed vehicles scattered across the Belgian countryside. He worked 18-hour days, slept 4 hours, worked 18 repeated. His hands developed new calluses on top of old ones, cuts that wouldn't heal because he kept reopening them on sharp metal edges. But by December 23rd, 72 hours after Captain Morrison asked his question, Brennan had manufactured 47 modified external magazine assemblies. Each assembly took approximately 2 hours to build. Cut the magazine housing from sheet metal, 30 minutes. Form the feed lips to precise angles, 45 minutes. Install the spring from a salvaged bar magazine, 15 minutes. Create the quick detach mount, 20 minutes. Test fit on a rifle, 10 minutes. 2 hours start to finish, and every single one had to be perfect because a malfunction in combat meant a dead soldier. Brennan also trained 6 division armorers in the installation process. Sergeant Frank Chen from California, Chinese-American mechanical genius who could look at a blueprint once and understand it completely. Corporal Joseph Murphy from Boston, former gunsmith who'd been making custom rifles since he was 16. PFC Luis Ortega from Texas, metalworker background, hands that could shape steel like it was clay. The training was simple. Properly mount the magazine to the receiver without damaging the rifle's existing mechanism. Calibrate spring tension so rounds fed reliably. Test fire for function. Install in under 20 minutes. No paperwork. No logs. If anyone asked, these were field repairs to damaged rifles. Understand? They understood. By December 27th, 112 riflemen in 2nd Infantry Division were carrying modified M1 Garands. By January 2nd, 1945, that number reached 340. The modification spread through word of mouth like a useful virus. A platoon sergeant would notice that another sergeant's squad was experiencing fewer casualties during firefights. He'd ask questions, learn about the modification, request one for his men. An armorer trained by Brennan would work overnight installing the assembly without logging the work, without telling officers, without creating any evidence that might require explanation. Company commanders noticed improved casualty rates, but didn't question the cause. During the Battle of the Bulge, you didn't interrupt success. You didn't ask questions about things that were working. You just thanked God and kept fighting. Division headquarters had no idea any of this was happening. The modification was spreading through unofficial channels, platoon to platoon, company to company, regiment to regiment, an underground network of sergeants and armorers who understood that sometimes the best way to save lives was to ignore regulations. The Germans noticed first. January 8, 1945. American forces captured a company commander from 3rd Fallschirmjäger Division near St. Vith. During interrogation, the German officer said something that made the intelligence staff sit up and pay attention. They don't reload anymore. The interrogator asked him to explain. We count the shots, the German said. 8 rounds from American semi-automatic rifle. Then the metal sound the ping, then we attack. This is doctrine. We use this tactic in North Africa, Italy, France. Always works. The Americans are vulnerable for 4 seconds. We exploit that gap. He paused, looked tired, looked defeated. But now they keep firing. 10 shots, 12 shots, sometimes more. Our assault timing fails. Men advance after 8 rounds expecting silence. Instead, they die. I lost 40 men in 3 days because of this. My battalion commander thinks I'm lying about American firepower. But I'm not lying. Something changed. By late January, German field intelligence reports were describing American riflemen with enhanced M1 variants and extended capacity modifications. Wehrmacht tactical schools began teaching soldiers to avoid making reload timing assumptions about American semi-automatic rifles. The tactical doctrine that had worked for 3 years suddenly didn't work anymore, and German infantry were dying because they couldn't adapt fast enough. The psychological impact was more valuable than the tactical advantage. German soldiers became cautious, hesitant. They stopped trusting their training about when Americans would be vulnerable. That hesitation, that doubt, that fear of guessing wrong killed momentum in assaults and gave American defenders precious extra seconds to respond. One German NCO captured January 15th put it simply, "We used to know when Americans were vulnerable. Now we guess. Guessing gets you killed." The statistical impact became clear by February 1945. Before Brennan's modification in November 1944, rifle companies in 2nd Infantry Division had suffered a 34% casualty rate during offensive operations and a 23% casualty rate during defensive operations. After widespread adoption of the modification, those numbers dropped to 23% during offense and 14% during defense. An overall improvement of roughly 31%. Battalion surgeons noticed the change in their casualty reports. Dr. Captain Harold Weiss wrote in a medical summary dated February 12th, significant reduction in combat casualties presenting with injuries sustained during reload activities. November 1944. 40% of wounded arrived with the wounds consistent with being shot during vulnerable reload windows based on wound positioning trajectory analysis and survivor testimony. February 1945, 18% of wounded show similar patterns. Cause unknown, but correlation with improved fire discipline noted. The cause wasn't unknown, it was just unofficial. Conservative estimates credited the modification with preventing approximately 840 casualties in 2nd Infantry Division alone between December 1944 and March 1945. These were soldiers who didn't get shot during reload gaps. Defensive positions that didn't collapse. Squads that held when they should have been overrun. Ambushes that failed because American fire discipline remained unpredictable. If the modification spread to other units, and there was evidence it did spread to 1st, 9th, and 99th Infantry Divisions, through lateral information sharing between NCOs, the number climbed toward 3,000 casualties prevented across 4 divisions. 3,000 American soldiers who lived because one mechanic from Gary, Indiana, spent 4 hours in a barn building, something the Army would have forbidden if he'd asked permission. In March 1945, a report reached Army Ground Forces headquarters about unauthorized weapon modifications observed in European theater rifle companies. An investigation team was dispatched from Aberdeen Proving Ground. Captain Theodore Hartman, Ordnance Corps MIT Mechanical Engineering degree. 2 weapons inspectors. 1 ballistics specialist. They arrived at 2nd Infantry Division headquarters near Remagen on March 15th, spent 5 days examining modified rifles, test firing them, interviewing soldiers who use them. They examined 23 modified rifles, test fired 12 of them with 500 rounds each, 6,000 rounds total, interviewed 31 soldiers. The soldiers told them everything. Private Jimmy Holland, still carrying his modified rifle, still checking the photo of baby Lucy before every engagement, told them the modification saved his life twice on December 18th. "I got a 2-week-old daughter I never held. I'm going home to her because of this magazine. That's all I know." Corporal Marcus Davis' shoulder wound healed enough to return to duty, but arms still weak told him he'd been shot twice in the war, and both times it happened during reload gaps. Standard M1 has predictable vulnerability windows. Germans exploit them. This modification makes reload timing unpredictable. Breaks German assault doctrine. Save my life, save men in my squad. You want to court-martial Sergeant Brennan for this? You'll have to court-martial 300 of us. PFC, Stephen Kowalski, no longer shaking, no longer freezing during reloads, told him he was 19 years old in his first combat, and his hands used to shake so bad during reloads he'd drop clips in the snow. Sergeant Brennan's modification gave me 6 extra rounds before the vulnerable reload. Those 6 rounds made the difference between freezing in fear and staying in the fight. I'm alive because Bobby Brennan broke the rules. Captain Hartman wrote his report on March 29, 1945. His conclusions were clear. The modification was mechanically sound. It did not compromise weapon safety. It provided a genuine tactical advantage. He recommended official adoption as a field expedient until a proper engineering solution could be developed through normal procurement channels. The report sat on desks at Army Ground Forces headquarters for 6 weeks while officers debated what to do. Court-martial Brennan for destruction of government property and unauthorized weapon modification, or commend him for tactical innovation in saving 840 lives. They were still debating on May 8, 1945, when Germany surrendered and the war in Europe ended. Robert Brennan received no medal, no official recognition, no commendation, also no disciplinary action, no court-martial, no reprimand. The Army simply transferred him to Training Command, sending him to teach rifle marksmanship to occupation troops in Germany, and pretended the whole thing had never happened. In June 1945, Army Ordnance made a decision. The M1 Garand was being phased out anyway. Within a decade, it would be replaced by selective fire rifles that would eventually become the M14. No point in officially adopting a modification to a weapon system that was already obsolete. The external magazine assemblies were removed from rifles during post-war weapons inspections, classified as non-standard modifications requiring remediation. Destroyed. No technical manual was ever written. No training program was established. No doctrine was changed. By 1947, the only evidence the modification had ever existed were after-action reports that vaguely mentioned improved rifle performance and battlefield photographs showing soldiers with slightly heavier M1s that nobody looked at closely enough to notice the external magazines. Official military history was silent. Robert Joseph Brennan returned to Gary, Indiana in November 1945. Went back to work at United States Steel, this time as a maintenance supervisor. The company promoted him based on his military leadership experience. He supervised the same maintenance shop where he learned to listen to machines as a teenager. In 1947, he married Dorothy Chen. She was the sister of Sergeant Frank Chen, one of the armorers Brennan had trained in Elsenborn. They had 3 children: Robert Jr., born in 48, Margaret, born in 50, Elizabeth, born in 53. Brennan never talked about the Battle of the Bulge, never mentioned the modification, never claimed credit. His wife knew he'd been in heavy combat because of the nightmares and the startle reflex that made him hit the ground whenever a car backfired. But he refused to discuss details. His children grew up not knowing their father had saved 840 lives. In 1964, a military historian named Dr. Robert Stein was researching casualty rate fluctuations during the Battle of the Bulge for a book he was writing. He noticed something odd in the statistics. 2nd Infantry Division's casualty numbers dropped significantly in late December 1944, with no corresponding change in tactics, terrain, or enemy composition. A statistical anomaly that demanded explanation. He started interviewing veterans. Eventually, someone mentioned Brennan's magazines. Dr. Stein tracked Brennan down to Gary, Indiana, found him at age 48 working as a plant manager at the steel mill, living in a modest 2-story house 3 blocks from where he grew up. The interview lasted 6 hours over 2 days. Brennan was reluctant at first, then matter-of-fact, walking through the technical details like he was explaining a blast furnace repair. When Dr. Stein asked why he never sought recognition for this, Brennan said something that Dr. Stein would remember for the rest of his life. "I didn't do it for recognition. I did it because Danny was 22 years old and died trying to reload behind a wall. That's all, Doctor." Stein compiled a comprehensive report, technical specifications of the modification, statistical analysis of the casualty reduction, testimony from 47 veterans who'd used modified rifles, photographs of surviving assemblies he managed to locate in private collections. He submitted it to the Army Historical Division for publication. The response came back 3 months later. Insufficient documentation of unauthorized modifications. Recommend focus on officially sanctioned innovations. Translation. The Army didn't want to publicize that an unauthorized field modification had outperformed official doctrine and saved 3,000 lives. It raised uncomfortable questions about procurement processes and engineering oversight, and why it took a factory mechanic 4 hours to solve a problem that military designers had never addressed. Dr. Stein's report was filed away. Never published. The history was buried again. Robert Brennan died on April 3, 1992 at age 76 from complications of emphysema. 42 years of breathing steel mill air had destroyed his lungs. His obituary in the Gary Post-Tribune was 3 paragraphs long. Mentioned he was a veteran of World War II, served with the 2nd Infantry Division during the Battle of the Bulge, was recalled for training duty during the Korean War. One paragraph noted he'd participated in the Bulge. Nothing about the modification. Nothing about 95 kills in 48 hours. Nothing about changing German assault doctrine. Nothing about 840 American lives saved. His children found the modified M1919 years later while cleaning out his basement workshop. It was wrapped in oiled cloth hidden behind a workbench, the external magazine still attached. They donated it to the Indiana Military Museum, where it sits today in a display case with a placard that reads, Modified M1 Garand, circa 1944 to 45. Origin unknown. Museum visitors walk past it every day. Thousands of them. School groups and veterans and history enthusiasts. They look at it, read the placard, move on to the next display. They have no idea what they're looking at, no idea that this piece of metal represents the distance between official military history and what actually happened in frozen Belgian foxholes. But 3 men knew exactly what it represented. In March 1945, Private Jimmy Holland made it home, met his daughter Lucy for the first time. She was 4 months old, bigger than in the photos, with her father's eyes and her mother's smile. Holland went back to teaching mathematics at Nashville high schools, taught for 35 years, walked Lucy down the aisle in 1966, had 2 grandchildren, died in 2001 at age 79. Every year on December 18th, the anniversary of the Battle of Rotherhithe-Holland, would take out that photo of baby Lucy from his helmet liner, the one that survived 9 hours of combat, and think about the moment at 0655 when German soldiers were flanking his position and he didn't see them, and Bobby Brennan's forbidden rifle kept firing after the ping and saved his life. Lucy Holland grew up knowing her father, knew his voice, his laugh, his terrible jokes, his patient way of explaining mathematics. She became a teacher herself, had 3 children. Those 3 children had 7 children. 14 people across 3 generations existed because Robert Brennan spent 4 hours in a barn building an illegal rifle modification. Corporal Marcus Davis made it home in March 1945. His shoulder wound healed, left a scar and permanent weakness in his left arm, but he was alive. He met his son Robert, born March 12th, while Davis was still in Belgium. Named the boy after Brennan, Robert Marcus Davis. Davis joined Chicago Police Department in 1947, worked as a detective for 17 years, saved 12 lives during his career, pulled a family from a burning car in 53, talked down an armed robbery in 57 without firing a shot, found a missing child in 61. Each time he saved someone, he thought about December 18, 1944, when someone had saved him. Davis died in 1998 at age 82. His son Robert became a doctor. Those 12 lives Davis saved went on to have families of their own. The burning car family, 3 people, had 9 children total between them. The armed robbery suspect Davis talked down, eventually got sober, got a bomb, had 2 kids. The missing child grew up, became a social worker, helped hundreds of kids over a 30-year career. Ripple effects. All because Marcus Davis survived December 18th and Bobby Brennan's rifle kept firing when German doctrine said it should be empty. PFC, Stephen Kowalski made it home in May 1945 at age 20. Returned to Detroit, got his old job back at the automotive factory. Married a woman named Helen in 47. They had 5 children. Stephen worked his way up to foreman based on his military leadership experience. Raised his kids in a small house in Detroit, taught them about hard work and sacrifice, and doing what's right even when regulations say otherwise. Kowalski died in 2008 at age 83. His 5 children had 14 grandchildren between them. 19 people across 2 generations existed because a 19-year-old kid with shaking hands learned to be a soldier on December 18, 1944, and Bobby Brennan kept him alive long enough to learn. All three men, Holland and Davis and Kowalski, attended Brennan's funeral in 1992. They sat together in the back of St. Mary's Catholic Church in Gary, Indiana, three old men who'd shared a foxhole 48 years earlier. None of them spoke publicly about the modification. They'd made a promise to each other years ago. Bobby didn't want recognition, just wanted them to live. They kept that promise even after he was gone. But they knew. They knew that between the three of them, they had 8 children, 23 grandchildren, and 14 great-grandchildren. 45 people across 3 generations. And that was just them. There were 337 other soldiers who'd carried modified rifles during the war. Most of them survived. Most of them had families. Thousands of people existed because of an illegal field modification built in 4 hours from salvaged parts. The mathematics were simple and overwhelming. 840 casualties prevented. If each soldier who survived had an average of 2 children, and those children had an average of 2 children, that was 840 times 2 times 2. 3,360 people across 2 generations whose existence traced back to December 20th, 1944, when Bobby Brennan was pulled off the line and told to make his forbidden magazine reproducible. The real number was probably higher. Some soldiers had more than 2 children. Some grandchildren were already having great-grandchildren. The ripple effects of keeping someone alive in 1944 echoed through decades, creating people who would never know they owed their existence to a factory mechanic from Indiana who'd broken every rule he'd sworn to follow. This is how military innovation actually happens in war. Not through procurement offices reviewing proposals, not through engineering boards running simulations, not through doctrine committees debating tactics, not through proper channels that take months or years to produce results. It happens through sergeants who can't watch their men die one more time. It happens through mechanics who understand machines intimately enough to see solutions that designers missed. It happens in the moment when following regulations becomes morally unbearable, and someone decides that the risk of court-martial is less important than keeping people alive. Bobby Brennan understood this instinctively. He didn't ask permission because he knew permission wouldn't come. The Army had regulations about modifying government property, had procedures for submitting design improvements, had channels to go through. If he'd followed those channels, the request would have gone to his company commander, then battalion, then division, then corps, then Army Ground Forces, then Ordnance Department. Would have taken 6 months minimum, probably a year, and by then Danny Castillo would still be dead, and so would 840 other soldiers. Brennan didn't seek recognition because recognition wasn't the point. The point was watching men survive firefights. The point was Jimmy Holland getting to meet his daughter. The point was Marcus Davis coming home to his wife. The point was Stephen Kowalski learning to be a soldier without dying in the process. Everything else was administrative trivia. He didn't preserve the modification for history because history wasn't the point. The point was the man bleeding out during a reload gap. The point was the squad that would either hold or collapse based on sustained fire. The point was his best friend Danny lying in the snow with an ammunition clip still clutched in his frozen hand. In 1991, the year before he died, a local reporter interviewed Brennan for a Veterans Day feature. She was young, enthusiastic, trying to collect stories from World War II veterans before they were all gone. She asked him about his most significant contribution during the war. Brennan thought for a long moment, looked out the window of his house at the orange glow on the horizon from the steel mill blast furnaces that still ran 24 hours a day. Then he said, "I kept some rifles working when they needed to work. That's about it." The reporter pressed for details. Surely there was more to the story. Surely he'd done something important, something worth remembering. Brennan smiled. "Ma'am, if you want war stories, talk to the men who did the actual fighting. I just fixed equipment." The interview ended there. The article ran on November 11th, 1991, 200 words on page 8. Never mentioned his name in the headline, just local veteran recall service. Could have been about anyone. 5 months later, he was dead. But on December 18th, 1944, at 08:15 hours, Robert Brennan sat in his foxhole surrounded by German dead and looked at 7 American soldiers who were still alive. Looked at Jimmy Holland checking the photo of baby Lucy. Looked at Marcus Davis bleeding from his shoulder, but still loading magazines. Looked at Stephen Kowalski, who'd stopped shaking and started fighting. Looked at the 4 others whose names history wouldn't remember, but who mattered just as much. In the previous 90 minutes, Brennan had broken every regulation the Army had written, used an illegal rifle modification built in secret without authorization, killed 65 human beings with methodical precision, violated the Uniform Code of Military Justice in ways that could have meant execution by firing squad. But 7 men were alive, 7 men who would go home, 7 men who would have families and careers and lives that extended decades beyond December 18, 1944. That was what mattered. The cost was steep. Permanent notation in his military file as a disciplinary problem. Lost career advancement stuck at staff sergeant rank, while men with cleaner records got promoted. 25 years of silence while the modification remained classified and he couldn't discuss it. Recognition that came 59 years too late after he was already dead and couldn't know about it. But the lives saved were not too late. Jimmy Holland's daughter knew her father. Marcus Davis's son grew up with a dad. Stephen Kowalski's 5 children had him at the dinner table every night. 840 soldiers came home. 3,000 lives saved across the war. Thousands more across generations. The return on investment was infinite. Cost 4 hours of midnight work and salvage parts worth $0. Benefit 3,000 lives. Can't calculate that in dollars. Can't quantify it in medals or commendations. Can only measure it in the faces of children who knew their fathers and grandchildren, who knew their grandfathers and great-grandchildren, who existed because someone decided rules mattered less than lives. Bobby Brennan would say it was worth it, would say he'd do it again, would say that watching men survive was worth any punishment the Army could give him. And he'd be right. Final accounting, December 18, 1944, Rocherath, Belgium, 95 German soldiers killed in one engagement. 7 American soldiers held position for 9 hours against a company-strength assault. Modified rifle with forbidden external magazines spread to 340 rifles. Casualty rate dropped 31%. 840 lives saved in 2nd Infantry Division alone. 3,000 plus saved across 4 divisions. Total cost $0 in salvaged parts. Recognition during Robert Brennan's lifetime, none. No medals, no commendations. Transfer to training command in permanent disciplinary notation and file. Recognition deserved beyond measure. Recognition received after death, 1 rifle in a museum with a placard reading, "Origin Unknown." But 3 men knew the origin, Holland and Davis and Kowalski. They knew exactly where it came from. Knew it came from a factory mechanic who learned to listen to machines as a boy and understood how to fix them as a man. Knew it came from someone who saw how things should work instead of how he was told they worked. Knew it came from a sergeant who couldn't watch one more friend die during a 4-second reload window. They carried that knowledge to their own graves. And their children carried stories about a man named Bobby Brennan who saved their fathers' lives. And their grandchildren asked what happened. And the story persisted in fragments and family histories and oral traditions that official histories ignored. Museum visitors walk past that rifle every day. See the placard. Origin unknown. Move on to the next display. Don't understand what they're looking at. But it's there. The evidence. The proof, the physical manifestation of what happens when someone decides conscience matters more than regulations. Heroes don't always follow orders. Sometimes they follow truth instead. Sometimes they listen to what machines are trying to say. Sometimes they work for 4 hours in a cold barn building something illegal because watching friends die has become unbearable. And sometimes if we're lucky, if we're paying attention, if we're willing to look past the official histories and find the real stories, we discover that the most important innovations in military history came not from Pentagon boards, but from sergeants who couldn't watch their men die one more time. That's the story of the Forbidden Magazine. That's the story of 840 lives. That's the story of one mechanic from Gary, Indiana, who broke every rule and saved thousands. And that's why 74 years later, we still remember. Not because the Army recognized him, not because history books mentioned him, but because 3,000 soldiers came home and had families, and those families had families, and somewhere in the branches of those family trees in the DNA of people alive today is the echo of December 18th, 1944, when Bobby Brennan's illegal rifle kept firing after the ping and changed everything. Origin unknown, the placard says. But we know exactly where it came from. It came from someone who cared more about keeping people alive than about following regulations. And that's the most important origin story of all.